Okay, so first, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening. The State Library is very proud to bring you this program, the second of many programs this year celebrating the Kansas 250 bookshelf. Tonight, Pat O'Connor and Seth Bate will share how music influences their communities, Wichita and Winfield. There will be time for questions at the end of the program, so please share your questions in the chat, or when it's time for the question portion of the evening, you can use the raise hand function. So I will now let Seth begin the program.
All right. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, friends, for being here. If any of you have a way to turn on your camera and don't mind, it's a real gift of energy for us presenters to be able to look at people. Um, but we're also going to be showing slides, so we won't be able to see very many of you at a time. My name is Seth. I'm joining you from rural Cowley County, close to Winfield, where I live. And I'm going to take the first 15 or 20 minutes here to talk about community as it relates to Winfield and Winfield. And then I'm really looking forward to hearing Patrick talk about his great book. So I'm pushing the share button. I have trouble imagining how it could be, but if you want more of me after tonight, I've been fortunate to have some great interviews that are available on a number of podcasts. So tonight, I'll just be talking for 15 or 20 minutes about one aspect of Winfield and the Walnut Valley Festival. If you want more extended chances to dig in, I especially recommend the Kansas 1972 podcast that Kara Heitz put together. Episode 7 is about roots music in Kansas and devotes a lot of time to the Walnut Valley Festival. And Kara interviewed me for that in the campground of the Walnut Valley Festival one year. You can also check out Prairie Journal on KPR. Thank you, Kay, for being here. KPR just re-aired an interview with me, so it's very close to the top of the feed if you want to check out their Prairie Journal online or in your favorite podcatcher. And I've done episodes of Wichita Public Libraries, Read, Return, Repeat, and Music Trails with Mark LaFond. And if you actually watch all of that and you haven't come to the Walnut Valley Festival yet, then clearly I'm not doing my job as a speaker. But I'm not here specifically to certainly represent or even advertise for the Walnut Valley Festival, but it does happen to be one of my favorite things in the world and was the subject of my thesis when I got my master's degree in history from Wichita State University. And that thesis was adapted to the book Winfield's Walnut Valley Festival. People who come to the Walnut Valley Festival every year often say it takes a year to recover from Winfield because those are an intense 10 days, and it takes Winfield to recover from a year. So many people go to Winfield as their mental health break after surviving a year in the rest of their lives. So I'm talking specifically about the Winfield community and the Winfield community to tie into the theme of the Kansas 250 bookshelf. And so a little bit of nomenclature. I know the people who are joining from the Winfield Public Library know this. I'm not sure everyone else does. So the Walnut Valley Festival is the official name of a bluegrass and acoustic music festival that happens in Winfield every year. The main 4 days of the festival are the third weekend in September. But very few people use the phrase Walnut Valley Festival as an entire phrase most of the time. If you read about the festival, you'll find that on first reference and then it'll get shortened. So sometimes you'll see just the initials, you'll see WVF. But most people who attend the Walnut Valley Festival refer to it as Winfield. And so if you are anywhere but Winfield and you hear the question, are you going to Winfield? The answer most likely has to do with whether or not you're attending the festival, not whether you're coming to visit our delightful little town. When you come to Winfield, sometimes you'll hear people around here just refer to it as bluegrass or just the festival, because around here there's really just one festival. It's the festival, right? But sometimes we in Winfield also refer to the Walnut Valley Festival as Winfield. So, for the purposes of tonight, I'm going to try to remember to distinguish Winfield from Winfield. You'll also see on this slide the poster for the very first Walnut Valley Festival, which occurred in 1972. And for those of you who are familiar with the festival, you'll notice that a lot of the details and iconography and even typefaces from that very first poster are still pretty familiar now. There's a lot of repetition and tradition associated with Winfield, the festival. The book that I was able to put together for the Walnut Valley Festival's 50th anniversary included my own research, but it also included contributions from a number of folks. People who are joining from the Winfield Library, I'm sure know most, if not all, of these names. But I solicited chapters from people who had some things to do with the founding and early days of the festival, from people who were staff of the festival, from people who keep some of the Winfield Festival traditions going, and from people who perform at the festival. And since this is being recorded, maybe I shouldn't tell this story, but I'm going to. When Bart Redford, who is one of the contributors and is also the head of the festival these days, when Bart and I first started talking about adapting my master's thesis into a book, I just assumed we'd kind of strip out the academic language and add some pictures and we'd have a book. And Bart said, well, we were thinking that's not really the Winfield spirit. The Winfield spirit is about lots of people being part of it and lots of people contributing to it. And I was pretty grumpy about that idea for 3 or 4 days. But I got over myself, and I'm really pleased that that's the direction we went, because there's no way in 140 pages and 100 images to capture everything about an event that's been going on for more than 50 years and involves so many people and so many kinds of people. But I think because of all these contributors and their perspectives, almost everybody who's connected to Winfield can see themselves in the book somewhere or another. I want to talk for just a moment about my history discipline, which is local and community history. It's part of the wider world of public history. And public history is a discipline within the study of history that goes back to the 1960s, give or take. And the premise of public history, and particularly community and local history, is that the places and events around us change over time, and that there's something to learn from that. So, set in context and interrogated, there's the opportunity to really learn from what's around us, even as we're participating in it. What makes community and local history hard to pursue is that most people don't think something is worth saving until something's been around for 25 years, or maybe until something's gone away and is missed. And so most of us don't save all those things that we historians love, receipts and meeting minutes and pictures with actual names connected to the pictures until it's hard to put them back together again. So that was certainly the case with researching Winfield, the festival, that while I was able to find some great primary sources, there are also a lot of things that I know people had once upon a time that just didn't end up being saved because nobody thought it was important. Another aspect of community and local history is that anniversaries often raise the importance of something or are a cue that something is ready to be studied or that people are ready to talk about it. And so I began my research on the Walnut Valley Festival when the 50th anniversary was still a ways off, but was in sight enough that I think people were more ready to talk and more ready to take it seriously. The Walnut Valley Festival itself, as with any event, there are a dozen origin stories, and so there's a little bit of picking and choosing, but some elements that absolutely were part of starting what's now the Walnut Valley Festival. One is that the Southwestern College, which is also here in Winfield, had a folk festival that happened in 1968, and a smaller version of that that was repeated in 1971, put together by Sam Onchus and his friends. And when I've gotten to hear from Sam about starting this, he said the real surprise was the dean let us do it. The college even gave us money, and there were community members and professors and administrators who trusted us enough to do this thing that we thought was responding to interest and need in the college community and in the community of Winfield. Another contributing element to what became the Walnut Valley Festival is that for a number of years, Winfield was the home of the Mossman Guitar Company. And Stuart Mossman, who founded that company, was somebody who was visiting other music festivals and kind of starting to imagine what it might look like to have one closer to home. Stewart also was building guitars that were specifically designed for the flat picking guitar style, which is really central to bluegrass music. So, Stewart's idea was kind of around there, and one of the people who heard about it was Joe Murrett, who happens to be my father-in-law, who worked part-time at the guitar factory, but who also was friends with a fella named Bob Redford, a local businessman. Joe and Bob were connected through the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, that was very active at the time. It was for people who were under 40 and civic minded and interested in growing business. And the Winfield JCs had had for a few years as their signature fundraiser hosting some motorcycle races that brought motorcycle drivers and racers and fans to town. And they had a little bit of a reputation for rowdiness, and the community was getting a little tired of the motorcycle races, and the JCs kind of let that go. I have heard more than one person say, you know, if we'd kept that up, people might have been talking about Winfield instead of talking about Sturgis. So, those what might have been questions of history. But Joe and Bob were interested in doing something that maybe had a JC's connection or maybe just a civic connection that created opportunities instead of obligations. So they didn't want to go around collecting donations. They wanted to actually put up something that could stand on its own. And they did, and Joe connected Stewart's idea and Bob's willingness to invest, and Joe took on the operations, and those were the three gentlemen who incorporated the Walnut Valley Association in 1972. And with the help of many friends and people they conscripted, put on the first festival. They drew on community members and church groups as festival workers, and even still today, community groups have food booths. Scouts are the most visible part of our trash patrol, and festival workers come significantly from the local community as well as all over. So, community was there in the idea of Winfield hosting Winfield, and community made it possible. To put the story in just a little bit of context of things that were going on at the time, the 1960s were, of course, a time that a number of folk festivals restarted because some of them had started in the 20s or 30s or 50s or grew. The Newport Folk Festival, in particular, was an influence on Sam, who went on to be the central part of the Southwestern College Folk Festival. And rock festivals were happening too. Kansas hosted Pittsburgh Peace, which is a fascinating story in its own right. You should dig that out. 1965 appears to have been the year that was the first thing that was specifically and exclusively a bluegrass festival. And bluegrass festivals were enough in the culture that by 1971, Playboy did a feature on those. I don't know if we can get that issue from the State Library of Kansas, Valerie, but if so, we'll all be requesting it. And by 1972, there was a Wall Street Journal article about the economics of starting a bluegrass festival and keeping it running. So another aspect of community that's connected to these kinds of festivals in general and our festival at Winfield in particular is that they are participatory. So folk and acoustic music and bluegrass in particular are all about getting people together to play. And if you come to the Walnut Valley Festival and you wander, really any place there's a little bit of shade, but certainly all through the campgrounds, you'll find people together, sometimes in pairs, sometimes in dozens, who are playing tunes together. And there's some song swapping. There are other kinds of music. We could also have a separate conversation about old time or Celtic music, but bluegrass music most often is about each instrumental player taking a turn playing the tune or a variation of a tune and passing it around the group or passing it around the circle. And that is its own kind of community. And then the things that go around it that make it possible for people to be together and stay together are part of the community. Chris Jones, who's a favorite performer, and also is a Sirius XM bluegrass host, talks about something that you'll also hear if you spend any time at the Walnut Valley Festival. There are a lot of people who never go to the stage show because they're much more interested in making music with friends and with friends they've just met. The Walnut Valley Festival community depends on camp life. So, a significant percentage of people who come to the festival stay on grounds. And camping has evolved over time at Winfield. Initially, camping was just something that was allowed so it would be possible for people to come from out of town. It was free, it was part of your ticket. And over time, camping has itself become part of the revenue that makes the Walnut Valley Festival possible, as I perceive it, and also has been a place where the city of Winfield has invested in the grounds where the festival takes place, and a place where the Walnut Valley Festival works hand in hand with the city to make the grounds comfortable and inviting and to keep adding amenities because participants in the festival, and I'm one of them, have gone from being teenagers who were very happy to sleep on the ground or not sleep at all to being people who want to sleep in comfort. And that takes space and that takes electricity and that takes chances to drive in your camper or your tent and all your kitchen equipment with you. The lineup of the Walnut Valley Festival is one of the few things that if you bring this up to somebody who loves being here, you're likely to hear some crosswords because people feel very connected to the spot where they camp. And so people over the years started lining up earlier and earlier in order to be more likely to be in that space. And that lineup has now has a digital dimension to it. If you wander through the Walnut Valley Festival, you'll see a number of campsites. Many of them have had the same name and the same personnel for decades, and often they have their own events and traditions. Feels like there's a wedding there every couple of years. And in the campgrounds, there are also stages where people can perform for an audience of people who are there primarily to see somebody they can't see on a stage. I am going to take the privilege as I'm winding down of reading just a little bit from a chapter of my book that was put together by Russ and Sherry Brace. Russ and Sherry are the longtime operators of the oldest of these campground stages known as Stage 5. They wrote, "The stage has given festival goers so many memorable moments, so many wonderful people, and unsurpassed musicianship, weddings, memorials, and funny and poignant songs. Festival goers shared a stunned silence on September 11th, 2001. Then, in remembrance and solidarity, they passed an enormous American flag through the Stage 5 crowd while singing God Bless America. Hearing a favorite performer, experiencing a new favorite performer, seeing friends you only see in September at the festival, learning a new tune, playing an old fiddle tune, laughing, crying, hugging, and bidding sad farewell at the end of a week-long gathering all make for a treasure trove of memories." And that's the way people tend to talk about being part of the community of Winfield. So, if any of you are interested in checking out the book and hearing the perspective of Russ and Sherry and those other contributors, I'd sure invite you to do that. If you're in or around Kansas and you haven't experienced Winfield, well, every year is the best year to come. And you will hear people who are devotees repeating this phrase. It happens to be on my work calendar on some very specific days. I can't. I'm going to Winfield.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Seth. That was really, really great. I myself haven't been to Winfield, but I know people who have, and it sounds like a lovely time. So we'll have a chance to ask Seth some questions and continue that conversation. But now we're going to let Pat take over the screen and share his experience talking about Wichita and the blues.
Thank you. And who could follow that? I don't know. Let me see if I can get my slideshow. Let's see, what do I have to do? I forgot. Share. Share.
Yep.
Is that it?
I see it. And so if you just hit your slideshow, hit play, or you'll be on your way.
Oh, yeah. Uh, Whoop, that's not right. Well, I can't get back to where I need to get to start the slideshow. So I'll just press on.
Okay.
There. I'll have to paint word pictures. Anyway, those are photos from the book, and for those of you who have seen the book. And the research was done in 1996 and 1997. I was teaching a course on blues at Wichita State, but I had been interested in blues since the 1960s. Then I thought, if I'm teaching a course on the national movement, maybe there was a movement in Wichita. So I dug in and I had contact with Barry Harris, who was famous in Wichita from Oklahoma, and he acted as a go-between between the interviewer and the interviewees. I got a grant from the Kansas Humanities Council, as well as Kansas Arts Commission and Wichita, some foundation in Wichita, 3 grants. So the musicians were paid for their time in the interview, and they were happy with that because blues music does not pay well. And some of these were 70s, 60s, and 70s, poor people, but they could still play. We had a concert when the museum exhibit came out, which is what the research was originally. I put that into a book a couple of years later, added to it. Finally, University Press of Mississippi was interested, and the book has been reviewed in 3 other countries. But unfortunately, they use their own language and I can't read it. So I have to assume that the review is good. I remember one French, the last 2 words were très recommand, so I'll take it. Anyway, and why would the rest of the country or even the world be interested in Wichita, the music of Wichita? What is so special about that? Well, it has to do with the concept of every man or every woman in the aspect of, is it transferable to other communities who have just as many blues players over the years, small cities like Wichita? Do they have a culture? Yes. Have they influenced the national scene? Probably not. So the thesis of my book was to find out if Wichita had a style, if there was a Wichita style. There's a Texas style, a Memphis style, an Oklahoma style. Uh, and I came up with probably not, but it could be in formation. That's what I wrote in the book. There could be one forming with helpful hands like Clayton Crawford. I don't know if you've ever heard of Clayton Crawford, but he's known as the Winfield Tornado, and because he plays exquisite lead guitar and just cooks the stage every time he gets up. He gave me a very brief interview, and his photos in the book, playing at a fundraiser for the African American Museum, and that's where that's where all the research went that I did, to the museum, Kansas African American Museum, which has been very helpful to me. So the first two chapters I devoted to prehistory or pre-Wichita history of blues. In that the first African Americans in Kansas were Buffalo Soldiers, minstrel players, cowboys, black cowboys. I have some good material on black cowboys. It was pretty rough to be a black cowboy in Kansas. Some of them got shot. And one story, a cook was a African American cook for a trail crew was arrested in some small Kansas town, and the trail crew came in and broke him out of jail because they were hungry, and he was a good cook. So I go on to study Topeka in comparison to Wichita and how they treated African Americans. You know, Topeka was founded by abolitionists, so they had a pretty good population of African Americans. And I don't know about their blues scene at all. It could rival Wichita. I don't know. All I know is Wichita. I worked on that. I interviewed 19 African Americans, and out of that, two women who were, one was a vocalist, Ramona Hicks, and the other played actually concert viola, and switched to violin. She was more of a rock artist, but she knew the blues. Believe me, she had. She ended up going to a country and western phase, playing country, or what do they call that? Oh, Bob Wills type music, which is anathema to folk purists, but nonetheless, I've got some great interviews. They were paid $50, and then they were paid $50 again if they performed at the museum for the opening of the exhibit. We had 200 people there, including the director of the Kansas Humanities Council, who deigned to drive from Topeka, or wherever she lives, probably Lawrence, down to Wichita, an unheard of thing, to come off the heights of northeast Kansas into the lowlands of Wichita. And she gave a nice talk. So, and these people, they had to use a cane. Some of these people, the musicians, had to use a cane to get up to the stage, but they played like they were 15 or 19. They just rocked the house. That's on a tape somewhere, or it's on, I hope it's at the museum. But the book, oddly enough, drew an interest from University of Mississippi. David Evans wrote the foreword. He's a preeminent blues researcher. I met him in Arkansas University. They had a blues conference there. This is all back in the 90s. There was a lot of resurgence in interest. So some of the main things that here's the book, by the way, my copy. Some of the main things I wanted to touch on were the interviews start with people who played here in the 1930s. They played jazz and blues as teenagers. The crowds in Wichita at the time liked a mix. He said sometimes we'd start off with something like blues. If they didn't like that, we could switch to jazz. This is Perry Reed, who played drums in the first band that I interviewed, the Syncopators, yeah. And Walton Morgan also played with him. He was tenor sax or alto sax. He lived with a very famous musician. They called him Bird, famous saxophone player from Kansas City, Charlie Parker, who came down to Wichita and played in, kicking around and became with Jay McShann and then came on his own. I understand. I'm not a scholar of jazz, and Walton asked him, Charlie, how do you get that sound out of your sax? And Charlie said, you have to learn to play a song back to front, which is pretty difficult. He couldn't do it. But so we moved to the 40s, and they had, that's when Jitterbug came in, and they had the weird suits, the zoot suits. But they still played the blues. And then in the 50s, that's when rhythm and blues came out in Wichita and hit it big. That's when many of the interviewees came up from Oklahoma, because Wichita offered employment. Wichita has usually been pretty good for employment. You may not get much money, but you can get a job. I interviewed one fellow who started off, they put him in the kitchen. He worked for one of the aircraft plants, and he said, my goal was to get out on the floor. And eventually, after a few years, he made his goal and retired. He switched from playing blues to playing in church. His story. These stories that's the main thrust of the book, is the participant, their tales are told. And I'm sorry that the book wasn't published when I first wrote it in around 2000, because many of them were still alive, and now not too many left. There might be one or two who are still here, but that was my goal, I kept trying to get this thing published, because these men and women gave of their time to me, let me hear their story. And that not everybody was willing. Not everybody's willing to talk, especially musicians. Normally they express themselves with music, but they did, and they gave me good stories, funny stories, sad stories. Barbara Kerr, the fiddler, said the first time she heard the N word, she was a kid. She was kind of riding her bike with her friend outside her little neighborhood, and it was on the border, and somebody started yelling the N-word, and she said, "What a nasty word." And she got back home and she said, "They must have been talking about my friend because she's kind of dorky with freckles." And so she was calling her friend that. And there's her mother heard her and said, and told her, "No, they were talking about you." What a horrible thing for a child to encounter. I mean, and that's just part of being Black during that time. A lot of it, but they were resilient. These musicians were resilient, and through their music, they became accepted playing for white audiences. So, did I blow through all my time?
You
Or
still
is
got
that
a
a
few
little
more minutes
short?
if you'd like to share anything else. You still got a few minutes.
Well, I was surprised that there was interest in um, France and Belgium, also England. They call it the UK, but since I'm Irish, I call it England. So there. Anyway, um, yeah, and one of the reviewers said he thought it was funny that I wrote a book about a Wichita style that didn't exist. He said, but I got so tired of reading books about the same old people, the same performers. I wanted to read something new. And that's what this book evidently accomplished. It showed a light on a little studied subject of small town blues culture. So I think that's enough. I'll start screwing up after this.
Okay, well, appreciate that. So now let me just make it so people can, let's see, unmute themselves. And if you could raise your hand so I can kind of call on you and make sure that we're staying organized during this part. It looks like so far I see something in the chat. It looks like a question for both of you. So it says, if you were to do the same project, what is something you might do differently, or advice you might give to somebody who maybe would take on a similar project? And also the process of researching and writing about music, did that change the way you experienced the music? Maybe for Seth, the specifically the festival, and Pat, how you experience the blues now. So if one of you would like to answer one or both of those questions, that would be great.
I'll hand it over to you, Seth, and I'll come in later.
All right. Thanks for the questions, Julie. If I were to do the Walnut Valley Festival project again specifically, um, uh, uh, the historian in me wants to do more with the so what. History is about here's a story and here's the context, here's why it matters. And I'm not sure that I answered that question fully. And I have some more developing ideas about what the Walnut Valley Festival represents, that if I were to do it again, I'd like to push on more. So I would also tell other historians, if you're writing about something that people love, and especially if you're writing about something that you love, it's so much fun to get all the detail. But it's easy to leave out that question, so what? So I have friends who are military historians, and they can tell you all the sizes of the guns on the boats, right? Or they can tell you what buttons went on which uniform in which year, but sometimes they're missing and what does that mean? That's a larger lesson or a larger thought. I'm not sure that the process of researching and writing about music changed the way I experience it, in part because I've been a music and theater critic all my life. And so I actually think that poisoned me as an audience member long before I took on this project.
And Pat.
Pat, how about
Okay.
you?
All right. Do I share or do you share?
No, you're good. I can repeat the question. I think one of the questions I guess I'm interested in also knowing about this is, did the process of doing the research for this book change how you view blues music in general, or the music that you hear that comes from Wichita? Did that change?
Well, I had a high respect for the musicians. Most of them played urban blues. I am a rural blues fanatic. So I wasn't really moved by the music, although I played with Harmonica Chuck, one of the interviewees. In fact, through a Kansas Historical Society program called Master Artist, we got Chuck a grant to be the master artist, and I was his apprentice. And we played 18 either rehearsals or gigs around town in a band. That was fun because we got into soul music. But I have a high regard for blues. I always have from the 60s. It didn't change my playing because I didn't, I'm still making, well, like Barry Harris said, he played with, when he came back to Wichita from Chicago, the musicians were making the same mistakes they were making when I left town. So I'm still making the same mistakes. But I would encourage people to write about music, of course, especially if you feel it. If you feel music, you can write about it.
Great.
And my book is available in all over the place. Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's available at the library too, thanks to a grant from the State Library of Kansas for being a notable book. They graciously paid for books to be put in 20 libraries at last count across the state. So, but I'd prefer you buy it, or my publisher would prefer you buy it. They like money.
Of
Uh,
course.
they need
Well,
money.
right. Well, I have a question. The first question had a couple, but I'd like to ask both of you to maybe give your perspective on, do you see a connection between your respective musical interests, the blues, the bluegrass community? Do you see connections there or carryover?
Well, certainly the bluegrass part of the music that I study, as with so many other forms of American music, is deeply connected to the blues. But thinking about the communities, um, I, I, I don't know how much crossover there is in interest, although, guitar nerds are guitar nerds, and so certainly there's some crossover there. But that idea that it's a music that people go to see the same people time after time, and they're interested in each new performance. There are only so many ways to play a 12-bar blues solo. There are only so many ways to play a fiddle tune, but people who are in those communities are interested in the nuance and the variation and how artists change over time. And there are also types of music where even the superstars are not untouchable. So with a half dozen exceptions, if you really want to meet your favorite bluegrass performer or your favorite blues performer, there are ways to do it because they're playing in small clubs and they're playing in theaters and they're generous to their fans. I don't know, Patrick, what stands out to you?
Well, I thought it would be very strange if the African American community would show up at a bluegrass show, but so many white people show up for blues. See, so there's no give or take there because African Americans move ahead and we look back. We we go back in time. They go ahead. They're thinking way down the line. Blues and the African American community lost favor when jump blues and when R&B hit, and that was the end of blues for them. Was there another part to that? Was it a toss-up question? What was the
Nope,
other part of
I think we're good there. I
it?
will,
Okay.
there is a person in the meeting. Brentley has unmuted, and I was wondering if Brentley had a question that they would like to ask. Maybe not. Okay. Oh, okay. So then I guess we'll go back to the chat, and it looks like a question from Winfield Public Library's watch party, asking Pat, why were you surprised that the blues was popular in France and England? And a side note, Clayton passes on his thanks for the mention. He's in the audience there at Winfield. So why were
Well,
you surprised?
why isn't he playing somewhere? He's he's lazy. Um, well, I wasn't surprised they're interested in the blues. I mean, they have some really good blues magazines over there. Very, very good. Good as well done as American. But what they like is the current blues, rock blues, whatever's playing over there. Or if they're going to study the history, they're going to study Mississippi, Texas, Chicago, not Wichita. But that's the beauty of having an international reach that you never know what they're going to like, especially in France. Look what they did with Jerry Lewis.
Looks like we have maybe a statement here from the chat that indicating they can hear in both your presentations how music created community among people who came together for that purpose. That they're curious to hear more about how each of you see the music that you researched impacting the communities of Wichita and Winfield, possibly beyond, maybe how that affects Kansas or the history of Kansas.
Seth, I think I may be losing my connection here.
Oh,
My battery's going low. A little light is flashing.
Oh,
I've
uh-oh.
got another battery.
gotcha. Well, hopefully we don't lose you, Pat, but go ahead.
Well, so Winfield, the festival, has certainly impacted Winfield, the community, in part because of notoriety. Like I'm always amazed at the number of places where I'll be in an airport and see a Winfield shirt or see a Walnut Valley Festival bumper sticker. Um, my sister-in-law was just in Hawaii and spotted a car with a Walnut Valley Festival bumper sticker there. And, that either means that somebody brought the bumper sticker or brought the car, but either way, like that's a reach. Um, uh, but and so that notoriety means something and creates a connection. The town of Winfield, over the years, in my interpretation, I think has moved from kind of grudging acceptance of the Walnut Valley Festival to really embracing it. But I think you'll still find people who live in Winfield who've never gone, who resent the fact that for 10 days it's hard to get around in the grocery stores. And so I think there's still um, uh, some distinction there or some different perception there. Oh, I'm getting a private note. It wasn't a bumper sticker. It was a camping sticker. So it must have been a vehicle that had camped. Um, I, I'm I don't know what the festival does for our perception as a town about being an arts community. I am confident that Winfield is a town that loves music, and the Walnut Valley Festival feeds that, and I think is a starting place for that. I'm still not sure that Kansas is a state that loves musicians. And so I do think there's a little bit of disconnect there.
Did you have any thoughts about how you see the music that you researched affecting Wichita as a community, either in the past or currently?
Oh, at the time in the 90s, it seemed to, when the exhibit came out, there was general appreciation. You know, African American churches have a thing they call an appreciation for their musicians. Every so often, the congregation will really get together and praise them. So that's essentially what happened at the concert. And of course, now I don't know what readers feel about the book. Most of the reviews are good, but the stories are, I mean, I didn't write the stories, definitely. These people lived the stories. So that's the important part of the book. Everything else is just, when you publish just like poor Seth had to shred his thesis to please the publisher. I also had to take things out and put things in. They wanted things put in, but I'm not saying anything against that practice. They thought it would make a better book. Okay, right. My life story somehow got left behind. No, I'm joking there. So I'll just have to wait and see what people think about the book. I don't know.
We have a question, probably maybe for both of you in different ways, but Seth, did you, when you were maybe investigating your book, did you also think about how Walnut Valley Festival affected the travel routes of the musicians, or how it's potentially over the time become important enough that it's a stop in some musicians, yearly trek, or that by attending the Walnut Valley Festival became more popular?
I don't know that that was part of my investigation in particular. It does draw a couple of things to mind. One is that there are some of the stage acts who make it very clear to their booking agents that the Walnut Valley Festival, if they call, that's the highest priority. And there was a particularly popular act that travels internationally, and my Winfield friends will know who I'm talking about, who were very grumpy with their booking agent a couple of years back when they were invited to Winfield, but they were only able to play 1 or 2 days of the festival because that weekend had gotten split with another festival, and they wanted to be in Winfield the whole time. The other thing that I'd say about geography, and this is more about people who attend, as you drive into the entrance to the Walnut Valley Festival, there are flags from, I hope I'm getting this right, I believe from every US state and I don't know, a couple dozen countries that represent people who have attended the festival from those places. And that was a project of the late Bob Floatman to document people who had come and to remember them through displaying their flags.
Hmm.
Patrick, what did you investigate related to travel routes and musicians?
Well, my story was one of migration. These people, very few of the 19 were born in Wichita. They came from Oklahoma, Arkansas, um, Texas, I think, if I can remember. Most of them Oklahoma. So they came for work. And one musician would come up here and get a gig and say, I need a bass player, I need a sax player. I know, I know him back in Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, they had a musical culture there, I believe, that we didn't have up here. We had in the community, they had the makings of one, but it was more solid in Oklahoma. But the money was up here, the gigs were here, so they came here. And then once you get to Wichita, you can't leave. There's some weird thing about it. So that's why people don't come to Wichita. They're afraid that they'll get stuck here. You know, it's like working for the post office. You can't leave because it's a 30-year retirement. You go to somewhere else, you have to work another 10 years. Not a bad deal, but I hope that answers your question. I should start writing these things down.
Great. It looks like we've had some the Wichita vortex. Seth has mentioned that there. It looks like he agrees with your thoughts there, Pat. Looks like somebody is possibly ending their time here and indicating that they're very happy about this evening's program and they're going to check out the books. So that's great. I do have a question, one last one before it's not quite 8 o'clock. So Seth, how does the Walnut Valley Festival maintain its reputation for being family friendly?
So great question. I do want to respond to something in the chat talking about
Sure.
the sign language interpretation that this person saw. So the Walnut Valley Festival has made it a priority for again, close to 30 years now to make sure that many of the stage sets are interpreted. And Linda Tilton, who lives in Lawrence these days, is the #1 sign language interpreter that gets used and is billed every year. So yeah, Linda's a big part of the festival for me too. How does the festival maintain its reputation for being family friendly? This was actually the first question that I took on in a class paper, building towards what eventually became my thesis. The Walnut Valley Festival, of course, was founded in the time of the 60s counterculture, and Patrick and I were having some off-Zoom conversations about when Patrick taught classes about the 1960s. And so the town was a little bit nervous about the kinds of people and activities who might gather for the festival, and and some of them did. Like the festival has been a place where counterculture is alive, and where people who are otherwise respectable can kind of take a break from that respectability for a week of the year. And at the same time, the festival has always been really focused on making it sure that both for its image and for the safety and comfort of people who would come from all walks of life, that family friendliness was maintained. So one of my favorite things that I found in my research when Stuart Mossman was talking to, I think the Winfield Rotary Club before the first festival, he talked about how bluegrass and country music attracts people, many of whom are 50 years of age or older. Um, uh, uh, Clearly trying to persuade the audience that it wouldn't be too rowdy. The festival has, from the beginning, been a place where motorcycles had to be parked. They could not be driven through the campground, maybe hearkening back to the days of the motorcycle races. So you can come on your bike, but it gets stored. And the festival has always maintained a perimeter around where alcohol can and cannot be consumed. And officially speaking, no alcohol is invited into the campground. Now, practically speaking, that is, of course, not how things have transpired. But the festival has focused on creating spaces where kids really can run around and be safe and their parents comfortable. And I've been one of those parents. I will say in the last few years, there's been a beer and wine garden introduced within the stage area of the festival itself. And in my view, successfully and without creating disruption. But that is the first step away from that stance of this being a no alcohol space that the festival has taken in its more than 50-year history.
Great, thank you. We have a question here, and I'm thinking it's probably for Pat in the sense that you talked about interviewing a lot of people. Maybe they're asking, did you record those interviews? I know you talked about those interviews were a few years back, but did you record those interviews?
Oh yes, we had recording equipment way back then. We had something called cassette tapes, and I had a Tascam tape recorder. And the tapes are actually, there are two places that they are accessible, and certainly at Wichita State University in their special collection. That was one of the stipulations of the grant from the Humanities Council. And the other, of course, is in the museum. But I think you'd have better luck listening to all, I don't know how many hours that, well, it would be probably 19 hours, maybe less. But they're pretty interesting. Oh, and I've digitized them for the museum, so because tape will evaporate. But no, that was a big part of the deal. Get the voices down, which I did, and then they played music on it too.
That's great. Well, we're just right at 8 o'clock. So if there's any questions from attendees, feel free to put those in the chat or raise your hand and we'll get a few more in. If not, then I'll end with one question for both of you gentlemen. Don't see any raised hands or anything in the chat, so I will ask. Both of you, I know, Seth, you kind of alluded to maybe Kansas isn't the most friendly to musicians themselves, but is Kansas music important on a national scale?
Yes. Next
Absolutely.
question. Yes,
Great.
because we don't get carried away. East Coast, let them do their thing. West Coast, let them do their thing. We've got the real thing here.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better than that.
Very good. Well, I would like to say that I very much appreciate both Seth and Pat for joining us this evening, sharing their love of music, sharing the work that they produced that created Kansas Notable Books. So hopefully you all will join us for our next program in March. And again, yes, maybe find Simiquin online somewhere or get your own. But yeah, so thank you, Seth and Pat, and thank you all for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you next month.
Thank you,
A
friends.
big, a big thank you to you.
Great. All right. Good evening. Bye.
Bye.